Hi, this is Mike, Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at one of Zotac premium RTX 3070 offerings. This is the RTX 3070 AMP Hollowback. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so on today's video we'll be taking a look at Zotac's RTX 3070 AMP Hollowback Edition. Now this is a premium version of their RTX 3070 range and incorporates what is essentially possibly one of the most gorgeous looking backplates and RGB implementations I've ever seen. So definitely stay tuned to see that later on in the video. But first of all, we'll go through the unboxing process, go through some of the specifications, and then I'll show you some of my benchmarking results and obviously the card in action, and then we'll come back with my final thoughts. So obviously to start this video off, depending when you're watching it, currently it is the beginning of February 2021. And yes, probably a lot of you are rolling your eyes right now thinking, Mike, you've got an RTX 3070, bully for you. Now this is actually on loan from Zotac. They've been kind enough to send me to check out and to take a look at. Like everybody else at the moment, I'm waiting for stocks to get better and also waiting for prices to get back to some form of normality. Currently, as we speak, this card is currently not available, although Zotac have reliably informed me they will be receiving a lot more shipments very, very soon. So definitely keep posted for that. Check out the links in the video description to see if it's available in your local areas. Pricing is also another very sensitive subject. Currently, as it stands, this is available sometimes in the United Kingdom for anywhere between the kind of £629 to somewhere in the region of £750, which agreeably is pretty much insane pricing. Realistically, this should be hitting the market in a perfect world at round about the kind of £550 to £600 mark. So depending on what happens in the near future, and obviously with stocks permitting, hopefully we should see this start to come back down to semi-sensible pricing. As far as pricing is concerned, actually for a twin fan model, this is pretty much in the mid-range. So I would consider this card, if you think about the entire product stack, this is in the kind of upper medium. So it's the top end of the twin fan models, and obviously when it comes to looks, yeah, definitely well up there. But it also does actually cool pretty much as well as some of the triple fan models. But we'll take a look at the cooling solution as we get into the review. So sorry about the lengthy intro, let's take a look at the packaging and we'll get the card out and actually see what it really looks like. So first of all, packaging wise, it's the usual deal from Zotac. They do a fantastic job on their packaging, they really do. I am a big fan of Zotac cards, and even when they're not sending cards to me to review, I do actually go out and buy them at my own money. So I'm not just shilling for them, I genuinely do love their cards. I find them great value for money, and generally they just work as they're meant to. So getting back to this one, the packaging, as you can see, it's got the hologrammatic type packaging as well, just to give it a little bit more bling. Not that it needs it, but certainly it's a nice thing to see. And looking at the specifications on the bottom there, you can see what we've got there. So we've got 8 GB of GDDR6, which actually is Samsung RAM as well. The chip itself on this is the GA104-300-A1, which is pretty common for 3070 cards, which also is actually diffused by Samsung also. So not only have you got a Samsung diffused NVIDIA chip, you also got Samsung RAM as well, keeping the family nice and neatly knitted together. Further on into the specs, it goes on out there Ice Storm, also the Spectra, which is for the RGB. Also you've got the Freeze, and also you've got Firestorm. So there's tons and tons of technologies in this card to help keep things either at the bleeding edge or keep it icy cold, depending on your preferences. Also as well, there's a full implementation of RGB support both on the sides, the top and the back of the card. So the software on there, you can control it. Although for me personally, just plugging this thing in, it comes up and goes straight into Rainbow Puke mode, which for me fits the bill perfectly. Obviously this is a RTX card, so it's a GeForce RTX 3070 and made by NVIDIA. Moving around to the side of the box, we've got more of the same. And on the back, it goes into, again, some more details about the individual features. So Ice Storm 2.0, Freeze, which is basically fan stop. So when the GPU is idle or underneath a certain threshold, the fans will actually stop spinning altogether, which will prolong the life of the fans and also keep the system a little bit quieter. It supports Spectra 2.0, which is Zotac's own RGB implementation, so you can go in and configure the RGB to your likings. There's multiple settings you can do. The card, as you see it, most people when they see this, they look at it and go, well, it's kind of like a turquoise and purple. What's the deal there? Actually, when it's installed in a system, because of the hologram nature of that design, it actually kind of just turns into almost like a dark black. So with the RGB lighting coming through, it's like one of those kind of two-way mirror kind of effects. So when the lighting's on, it just looks exactly as it should do. All the colors look absolutely perfect. So moving down to the bottom, so we've got our features. So we've got the 2nd gen ray tracing cores, 3rd gen tensor cores, PCI Express Generation 4. Also we've got implementation for DirectX 12 Ultimate, and it supports GDDR6 as we said before. You've got NVIDIA DLSS, and a whole ton of the cream of the crop of all of NVIDIA's current technologies. A lot of that goes a long way to actually giving this card the bang for buck that it does. Using DLSS in supported titles really does improve frame rates, offset of the quality of the actual graphics you're looking at. Although in these higher paced games, really the visual quality is something that just goes by in a blur anyway. But if you're playing some of those more popular AAA titles and you're playing in kind of career mode and you want to take in all those visuals, then you can quite easily flip off DLSS and enjoy it in its full glory. So a quick drill down of the actual specifications for the card itself. So it is the GA104 processor, and it's got 5,888 cores. Backing it up is 184 TMUs, or texture units. You've got 96 ROPs, 8 gigs of RAM, and a 256-bit memory bus. So yeah, most of you probably don't really care about any of that, but is it any good? Well, we'll find out a little bit later. So let's take a look at the actual card itself. Now the packaging, really good packaging on this, which for a card which is costing kind of a considerable amount, and actually more than some people will pay for an entire PC, you'd expect some decent packaging, and Zotac doesn't disappoint there. So not only have you got the outer carton, you've got the inner carton, and inside the inner carton there is an absolute ton of foam packaging. So whether this is coming from your local store down the street or whether it's coming from overseas, you're pretty much guaranteed it's going to come to you in A1 condition. When we look actually in the box itself, first of all, you're greeted with the Get Amped literature. So there's some bits and pieces in there. Basically a load of literature telling you about Zotac, the card itself, and there's a couple of stickers in there, which are actually holographic as well. So if you want to stick one of those on your PC, you're more than welcome to, but yeah, we'll be leaving that as it is. A nice touch as well, they've done the hologram effect on the actual packaging as well, which is, yeah, kind of nice. A little bit unnecessary. Again, when you're paying this kind of money for a graphics card, then yeah, every little that justifies it is a little bit helpful. Also included in the box are a set of cables. So we've got some conversion cables. So if you've got older power supply with 6-pin PCI Express connections, then you can put 2 of those together to make an 8-pin. In all honesty, if you're having to use these to combine power connectors, this probably isn't the card for you. Talking of power requirements, this card is rated at 240 watt TDP, which is actually a little bit raised from the standard NVIDIA reference design, which is 220. So there is a little bit of scope for a little bit of overclock in there and a little bit more performance. And actually the out-of-the-box performance of this card is actually pretty decent, and it does overclock itself very, very well, just using the normal NVIDIA drivers and the automatic tweaking. Of course, if you want to, because of the thermal kind of setup of this thing, with these 200mm fans and also the absolutely massive cooler, which actually weighs in at nearly 900 grams. The cooler is insane, but certainly that doesn't give you a ton of headroom. So if you've got the cooling and you've got a nice clean power supply, then you should be able to overclock this pretty decently. So looking at the actual card itself, and I've got to be honest with you, this really is a thing of beauty. It really shouldn't be in a PC, it should be on a shelf somewhere. Although, really you need to get to use it to actually make the benefit of it. But you know what I mean, this thing does look absolutely insane. So you've got on the front edge, you've got the Zotac gaming logos there, which do illuminate RGB. You've got the shroud on the front here, which is in that kind of almost like a pearlescent finish as well, which looks really nice. But as you can probably see from the camera, it is somewhat of a fingerprint magnet. But don't worry, get a microfiber cloth, give it a wipe off, put it in your PC, you'll be absolutely fine. Moving on to the back end, we've got the GeForce RTX logo, as expected on a GeForce card. And also you've got some sort of stylish cutouts there as well, which not only do they add a little bit of bling to the actual style to break it up, they're also there for cooling purposes. So they are used as exhausts for the fans, which the fans actually work independently of each other. So you can actually set the fans in the software to run kind of independently. So you can have one ramp up more than the other. You can really take advantage of the cooling situation here to either make it a full-on monster for overclocking, or you can use it as a really silent masterpiece. So looking at the fans, as you can see, again, you've got 200mm fans, which are slightly bigger than the norm. Most manufacturers will kind of opt for either 380s or 292s or combinations thereof, maybe a couple of 92s and an 80 in the middle, whereas Zotac in their wisdom have decided just to go with A slightly smaller design than the triple fan version, but with these two fans it really does work well. And as you'll probably see later on, you can see this card is virtually silent. In pretty much normal use, you can't hear it, you really can't. And also obviously you can change the fan profiles to suit your particular needs. If you want to, set the fans to 100%, at which point you will notice it. It is a little bit loud at 100%, but realistically under normal gaming loads, which I've actually tested, the fans rarely get over about 60-70%, so you've got no issues with noise and virtually it is undetectable in a normal system. So let's go around all the edges of the card. So on the top edge here, so we've got 3 display ports, which are all DisplayPort 1.4a, and also you've got an HDMI which supports HDMI 2.1a. So yeah, basically pretty much every resolution you could possibly think of is supported straight out of the box. Also obviously multi-monitor support, all that kind of stuff if you wanted to. Some people would say that that is a little bit lackluster, only having 3 display ports and 1 HDMI, but realistically I think for most people, if you're just into gaming, likelihood 2, possibly 3 monitors maximum, I think it's going to be absolutely fine. The card itself, as you can probably see from this side here, is a little bit of a chunky boy. So this is basically a 2.5 design, so essentially you're going to require at least 3 PCI Express slots. Personally, I wouldn't install this in a micro ATX system, especially if you've got one with a basement, because it is a little bit too close to the bottom to actually get a lot of air into those fans. But certainly if you want to, you can do, or alternately in a smaller system like that, just mount it in the vertical position, you'll be absolutely fine. Another thing to consider is the width on this one. So because it is actually a little bit shorter in length, it is actually a little bit wider, which is very commonplace with a lot of these modern RTX cards. So yeah, it does protrude a little bit, which is one of the reasons why I had to test it on my own editing PC rather than the PC behind me, because literally there just was not room to get the cables in. And talking of the cables, as we move back around to this side, you can see where the connectors are. So this requires 2 8-pin connectors. So that's going to give you roughly about 300 watts across the 2 connectors. Taking into account also the 75 watts, which is supplied through the PCI Express bus. So you've got about 375 watts coming into the card, which is well below the 240 watt TDP limit. So power delivery wise, you've got no issues there. When we take a look actually at the card inside, which you'll see some cutaways of, I've actually taken this apart to take a closer look at the cooler, and you'll see there's a 10+2 cooling setup, which are all digital PWM controllers. So this card is really designed very, very well. The PCB itself is pretty much the NVIDIA kind of reference model, which kind of makes sense because obviously they're trying to keep things cheaper. They have increased the TDP limit to 240, as I said, but there is a possibility if you wanted to, when aftermarket coolers become available, water cooling, etc., then there's a very good chance you can actually find a water cooler to bolt to this if you wanted to remove this gorgeous cover. And speaking of removing this gorgeous cover, at first it kind of, I was like scratching my head, how the hell does this thing come apart? Because it does look so well made and kind of, it does look like it's almost like one piece. But to take it apart, actually relatively straightforward. So you've got 4 screws here, which are your main screws above the actual processor itself. There's also another screw there, which kind of stabilizes the whole thing. And also because that extends past the PCB, so that keeps it all in place. And on the top edge where you've got your display inputs, there's 3 screws. So 1 on that edge, 1 in the middle, and 1 on this edge. After undoing those 3 and the 5 on the top, you can remove the cooler in its entirety. So really easy to work on. So if you're in a maybe slightly dusty environment, or you just use it a lot and you want to put some new paste on your GPU every now and then, it's really easy to actually get into. And also to disconnect the electrics for the fans and for the RGB, again, really simple, and also they're color coded as well, so there's no mistaking when you put it all back together, which is very lucky for me. Moving around onto this side, so we've got our PCI Express Gen 4 slots, and also you can see they're slightly easier, it's a cut open there, so there's tons of ways for the air to escape from this section. You can see all the cooling fins there. Cooling is really something that they've gone to town on this. Again, I can't stress enough how heavy this card is. Actually just holding it here is a workout in itself. Again, nearly 900 grams worth of cooling there. The card itself with the metal backplate is getting on for nearly 400 grams as well. So the whole thing together is pretty weighty. You can as well hopefully see from this angle the heat pipes. So you've got 6 heat pipes in total in there, which basically wrap themselves around all of the interior components. And also pretty much every part of this, the VRMs, everything which isn't actually directly touching the heatsink has got thermal pads on it. And the thermal pads are all 3mm big tough pads. So if you did want to change the pads for slightly uprated models, or you're looking at doing some DIY and you want to buy some pads just in case, so 3mm is the size of pads that you're going to need if you want to replace any. And they have actually gone completely to town. Literally anything which is potentially going to get warm has got a pad on it, so this thing does stay super, super cool. Looking at the back end, so to speak, this is, yeah, not a lot going on there. Actually pretty boring. Maybe they could have opened that up a bit to let a bit more airflow out, but again, that is probably going to keep it compressed so that air can blow through this fan, this side here, and then comes out through the vented section there. It's not entirely vented on this side, unlike the reference design from NVIDIA. So some people did complain that with the reference design, you've got too much hot air being blown straight up through into the CPU area of the system. So that is actually going to reject some of the air and bounce it back to be ejected out sideways. So that'll be taken care of by your system fans. On the back of the card, this is another area which I think they've done particularly well. So you've got this really nice metal backplate, which again, there's heat pads all across here as well. So wherever possible, they've added heat pads to try and transfer some of that heat away from the GPU and the core components and trying to keep the system as cool as possible. Again, this is what helps it with some of those cool factory overclocks. And a standard factory overclock is some ridiculous figure like 1785, which is a little bit up from, I think it's like 1750 or 1700 for the standard design. But when we're doing some benchmarking earlier, in my production system, so this is pretty much worst case scenario, but I think it's actually realistic for what most people will have at home. So this is my video editing PC, so we've got things like Adobe in the background running all their things. I've got OneDrive doing my backups, I've got Macri and Reflect doing backups, I've got my emails open, I've got Discord running in the background, I've got about 20 or so tabs open in various browsers, so this is pretty much worst case scenario, but yet still running some of the benchmarks, we've still got some pretty awesome figures, which were pretty much bang on for what you'd expect. I was going to try and close down as many things, apps as possible, but for me personally, I don't think that benchmarking a system with all that stuff disabled actually is a fair representation. Yes, it's good for seeing individual differences between individual makes of card, but in real world, are you going to do that on a regular basis? No, you're going to be streaming, you're going to be chatting, you're going to be working, you're going to be possibly having a movie playing on a separate screen. So for me, I think this actually does work out of a better testing example, and it's certainly very much in the real world. Moving back to the real world, this thing is crazy for RGB. Also on this top, hence the hollowback naming. So we've got loads of RGB through here as well. And also we've got this nice Zotac logo there. The one thing which I would have liked to have seen changed or slightly different, I guess because of the way the reference design works, essentially the graphics card itself, the actual PCB, ends kind of here. So all of this section is just overhanging. Hence why we've got the connectors there. I would have loved to have seen those connectors, I don't know, somewhere else. Maybe extended out on some extra cabling or something. But for me personally, because of the kind of the nature of this front panel, and you'll see from some of the cutaways and B-roll, you can see that my cabling is actually kind of strapped around here. Now, yes, you could, if you want to, you could put the cables and run them across the top. Again, it's probably one of those first world things, but for me, it does detract slightly. I would have liked to have seen those maybe routed to possibly to the back or somewhere else, just to give this a clear run. Again, it's a very, very minor thing. Most people won't give it a second thought, but it certainly does break up the lines of the RGB on the front. As it comes to the RGB on the top, realistically, if you've got a relatively high-end system, now I've tested this in my Ryzen 9 3900X system, and there's a huge cooler on it. It's a massive air cooler, so pretty much most of the RGB you can't see from the footage that I've given you, which is, again, is intentional because this is real world. I could have put a water cooler in there just to show you what the RGB looks like, but are you going to go and buy a water cooler just so you can see the RGB on the back of your graphics card? Potentially, but unlikely. So some of you may miss out on that. Obviously, again, if you're mounting it in the vertical position, then yeah, most of the RGB is going to be kind of irrelevant to you anyway. For me personally, I think the best option is to mount it in this position with a water cooler, and it will look absolutely amazing. That is, of course, if you can actually get one. So I've probably waffled on way too long, and hopefully you've seen from some of the B-roll what this card actually looks like. Essentially, to gauge performance, I would say in pretty much every title that I've seen, it performs better than the 2080 Ti, which I also don't have, so this is going from other people's benchmarks, which realistically, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of is it 3 frames per second faster than XYZ card, then certainly go and check out those reviews. But if you want an honest opinion about quality, the looks, all that kind of stuff, then hopefully this is going to answer a lot of your questions. It's built like a tank. The quality is exceptional, the build quality is absolutely fantastic. The ease of use, so for keeping it long term, if you're looking at either modifying it or actually servicing it on a regular basis, cleaning the dust out, all that kind of stuff, super easy to get into, it really is. The fans themselves, really decent quality, very low noise, keeps really quiet. Ultimately, doing testing, which again, doing benchmarks is kind of, it's unrealistic. But even under the harshest circumstances, with all my background processes running, this didn't get over 71 degrees C, and also still managed to get the megahertz up to around about 2000 megahertz during most runs on boost. So yeah, this thing is going to do really well. So if you're looking for a graphics card, should they come into stock very soon, then I would definitely put this on my shopping list. And actually, I'm very tempted to ask our friend at Zotac if he actually wants to sell me this card rather than me have to send it back. But we'll see how that goes in future. So anyway, hopefully this has given you some information about this graphics card. Hopefully for all of you guys that are trying to get one at the moment or in the future, hopefully, fingers crossed, you manage to get one. If you do, let me know in the comment section. I'll be really interested to know, and let me know what your performance has been like. I would also be very interested in that as well. So that's going to wrap this one up. This has been the Zotac RTX 3070 amp Hollowback edition. I think it's gorgeous. Catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.